Welcome back to Building on a Budget Models for the third and final part of the Double Beetle build with the Tamiya Beetle 66 and the Revell Cabriolet 1970. We'll start with the Tamiya kit here, and I used some Revell putty to fill in these small vents that go near the headlights because the car that I was basing it on didn't have these. After priming the car, I also looked around for any mould lines. There was some just above the headlights, and I also did the same to some of the body. I then gave it 4 coats of this nice gloss orange enamel. I was basing the car on this 1974 Beetle, which had been previously owned by my friend Amanda, though unfortunately she'd had to sell it earlier this year. I then started to use the Tamiya curved masking tape to mask off the area which I wanted to do in white. I had to be very careful here to stop the bleed from getting through, but the curved tape is very useful for this kind of job. It's also important to use cotton buds to press them into any gaps. I then used larger masking tape to mask off the rest of the car. I then used 3 coats of Tamiya white gloss. Following this, I then used some Plumber's aluminium tape for the chrome features on the car. I cut it into thin strips and then pressed the tape gently over the raised details along the sides and the bonnet. Don't want to press this too hard, as that will leave residue when you peel the remains off. You then use the point of the craft knife and go very slowly and gently along the edge. I then used my very narrow tweezers to peel off the excess. Having done this, I've since seen that you can do this more carefully by using masking tape as well, and I would do that if I was to do this again. I did this in sections rather than all the way down the car so that I could be as careful as possible. And there it is on this side. I printed off custom decals of the crescent shape vents that go behind the rear window on both sides of the car. I then added the Building on a Budget logo to the rear window as a kind of signature. I added this shape here on the side to represent the petrol door. I'm not a huge fan of these tail lights as they're all moulded out of one piece. I used some acrylic orange so that I could scratch off any where I painted in the wrong place. I did the inside in silver and then used some Sharpie pens for the colours on the outside. Fortunately, they fit very nicely into place and the holes go all the way through so that you can just fill the inside with some PVA. So obviously PVA will stop the plastic from fogging. Now here are the very nice metal transfers. Firstly, it recommends to cut them out with a craft knife, but this didn't work. Use a pair of scissors. I started with the 1300 for the engine cover. It goes on really easily, just with a bit of light pressure. This is the boot lid from the Revell car, by the way, which I adapted and it now fits, sort of, onto this car. It's really nice, unfortunately doesn't focus very well on this camera. The badge in metal looks very realistic. I just think it's a shame that they didn't do all of the chrome trim using these metal transfers. Really nice and reflective. The bodywork needs to be mounted at the same time as the engine cover and the bonnet because of the hinges. However, I had to adapt the hinges of the bonnet slightly because I changed the dashboard. As you can see here, it is possible to swap the engine covers between the Revell and the Tamiya, but I wouldn't really recommend it as it doesn't open as well, unfortunately. These little indicators were from the chrome sprue and just coloured with a little bit of orange Sharpie at the front. You need to drill holes for the wing mirrors. Probably should have done this earlier. Amanda's Beetle only had a wing mirror on the driver's side. The original handle for the bonnet fell off, but fortunately I was able to find a spare in my spare parts box. These are the train track bumpers from the 1970 kit. At the back they were more or less the right size, I just had to adjust the holes to make them larger. But at the front I needed to drill new holes into the car to fit the 1970s style bumper. I say 1970s, these are more Euro style bumpers I think. But they went in quite nicely and held firm with a bit of super glue. There are black decals on the front and the back to replicate the rubber trim. Then used a little bit of super glue to add these running boards. These were done in matte black and then with a little bit of silver Tamiya paint along the edge. I swapped the windscreen wipers around as they needed to go in a different direction. That also meant that I had to adjust one of them to be a little shorter. I discovered that you could put the 1970s style headlights into this car, but the 1960s headlights would not fit into the Cabriolet. Therefore, I chose to use the 1960s headlights, but left off the exterior glass, just putting in the interior lens to make it look as much like the 1970s headlights as possible. Not perfect, but still pretty good. There's the car nearly finished, just needs its number plates. Because the decal paper I was using was black and white, I coloured the number plate yellow first at the back, as they are in the United Kingdom, and did the front one white. I used a custom number plate website to get the correct font to fit the style that was used on this car. I'm pretty happy with this. I do recommend getting some decal paper to do some custom things like this. Probably larger jobs might be a little bit hard, but these look really good I think. And as the Tamiya Beetle is now finished, we move on to the Revell Cabriolet. Firstly, you can see that there are some bars and moulding points across the middle which need to be removed before painting. It's also then important to sand down any flash. I did these in 4 coats of enamel royal blue. Now the bonnet, even though it's a separate part, there are no hinges for it and you just need to glue it into place. This struck me as strange, but there we are. The badge on this is from the chrome sprue and it's quite nicely moulded, but it doesn't look nearly as good as the one from the Tamiya kit. Also, the chrome trim on this are decals, which is quite helpful. I tried my best to try and get these as straight as possible. I was pretty happy with how they look by the end of it. The trim on the sides of the car is helpfully done in 3 parts, which means that you're not struggling with a really long, thin decal that could easily snap. Again, these are raised, so you can do them using bare metal foil if you wanted to. I then used a little bit of silver paint for the window trim. The engine cover here is from the Tamiya kit and is missing ventilation, so I printed out some straight lines that were the right length and width in my custom decals and have added them to the boot for the vents. I then added the 1500 logo underneath. Looks nice, not quite as nice as the metal one. There's then a small Carman badge that goes here to signify that it was the Carman styling house that designed these Beetle Cabriolets. The folded roof here is made of 2 parts and there's piping around the outside, which you could do in white if you wanted to do it black. I chose to do it all in the sort of light grey, the same as the seats. I then used some aluminium foil to do these stone guards, which were moulded onto the rear fenders, and pushed them into place using the cocktail stick. I much prefer these tail lights to the ones on the Tamiya kit, as the chrome housing is separate to the lenses. The windows push in from the outside, unlike the Tamiya where they push in from the inside. I also added a Building on a Budget Models logo to the driver's side small window. These fit really nicely with a little bit of PVA. I chose to use the mudguards from the Tamiya kit since they weren't going to be used on that one. They were done in matte black, and then the VW logo was highlighted with some grey. The exhaust needs to be fitted before this tow hook. It's a nice feature to have this tow hook in case you wanted to put it with a trailer in a diorama maybe. Very much a holiday maker's car. Once I was sure the chrome light housings had stuck into place, I used a small amount of PVA to put the lights on over the top of them. A tip with the windscreen wipers is if they're chrome, use a black marker pen to add the rubber strip to one side of them. Let it dry and then put them on. It's just like a little bit of detail which can make the difference. There are small pinholes for the light housings to fit into place, so I put a little bit of super glue into those before fitting them in. As you can see here, I'd already fit the bumpers from the Tamiya kit into this one. The holes needed a little bit of widening, but they were okay. It's a huge array of number plates. I chose to go with the German ones, as it is a German car. And the last detail after this number plate was to add the D marker for Germany on the rear bumper. It didn't fit as well as it should because it's not designed to go with this bumper, but a little bit of super glue and I managed to fit it into place. And here are both cars together. And firstly we'll have a look at the orange Tamiya. This is a really good finish, as you would expect from Tamiya. I'm pretty happy with how it's gone. I think the paintwork looks pretty smooth. Some of the details are picked out, like using the panel line accent on the rear vents. And I think the rear light housings look slightly different, but the orange I think is a near enough match. Let me know what you think in the comments, which kit you prefer. And here is the Revell. Firstly with the roof down, there you can see the VW mudguards that I took from the other car. You may also notice that I used the wing mirrors from the Tamiya kit. I don't know why they're different on either side, but there they are. They fit with no adjustment at all. And here it is with the roof. I put the rear glass into this, but decided not to do the side glass. These are both really high quality kits and I would recommend them to anyone to build them. I think maybe I slightly prefer the Revell Cabriolet just because it's got more options. Please let me know in the comments which one you prefer, if you thought that some of my adaptations and swaps went well. Please do like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you soon.